This is Yu Young-chol, who became one of South Korea's most notorious serial killers. He terrorized the city from 2003 to 2004. The national press demanded answers while the police refused to acknowledge they were dealing with a serial killer. Yu's weapon of choice was a homemade hammer. With it, he embarked on a blood-soaked journey of violence before finally being brought to justice in a case filled with the most shocking twists you could imagine. Yu Young-chol was a skilled artist who, before his killing spree, created comics including pornographic ones. This was part of his life before he became infamous for his horrific crimes. Yu Young-chol committed his crimes with extreme brutality. He killed his victims, usually with a hammer, and then dismembered their bodies. Sometimes he even ate parts of his victims, claiming it cleansed his spirit. Now, let's delve into the twisted world of this Korean, also known as the Raincoat Killer. South Korea, 2004. The owner of several massage parlors in Seoul noticed a troubling pattern. Some of the girls working in his parlors were going missing. What was particularly strange was that their disappearances went unnoticed by family or friends, as many of these girls led isolated lives, making them easier targets. Something was deeply wrong. One day, the owner of a Seoul massage parlor received a call from a gentleman requesting one of his girls. The unsettling part? The call came from the phone of a missing girl. The police were immediately alerted, and an operation to trace the caller was launched. The plan was to send an undercover policewoman to meet the caller, setting a trap. When Yu Young-chol arrived at the designated spot, he was swiftly apprehended. What the authorities initially believed to be a straightforward case of kidnapping and human trafficking soon revealed itself to be much darker. During intense interrogations, Yu Young-chol confessed to murdering over 20 individuals, most of them sex workers or affluent elderly people. He agreed to show the police where he had buried his victims. Officers were left in shock, grappling with the sheer horror of the crimes and the unimaginable brutality of the acts committed by Yu Young-chol. This story began when Yu Young-chol was just a child, and his upbringing was marred by tragedy and events that eventually set him on the path to murder. Born into a poor family in Gochang in 1970, Yu had a difficult childhood. At school, other children mocked and bullied him because his family was of the lower class. Many of his future victims were wealthy individuals, and it is believed that his impoverished upbringing instilled a deep hatred for those who were much better off. Yu and his siblings were abandoned by their mother at a young age, when she left them at their grandmother's house and was never seen again. The children lived in dire poverty with their ailing grandmother until their father took responsibility and moved them into his home with his new wife, their stepmother. But this was far from a happy family life, as their stepmother was cruel to the children. Then, tragedy struck again in 1985 when Yu's father died in a traffic accident, leaving the family orphaned. For a young man, there was a chance to change his life. To escape poverty, he decided he needed to work hard and succeed. But after enrolling in art school, Yu Young-chol faced yet another blow. He was rejected by his peers and treated as an outcast. In 1988, he agreed to enroll in a technical school to gain any qualification he could. However, instead of studying diligently, Yu found a new way to make quick money by diving into a life of crime. Apparently, he wasn't very successful at it, because at 18, Yu was arrested for stealing from his wealthy neighbor and sent to a juvenile detention center. This wasn't the end of his punishment. Unable to attend classes at the technical school, he was expelled and continued down a slippery slope. He kept stealing, moving on to more valuable items, cash, and eventually cars. In 1991, Yu was arrested again after stealing from his landlord. This time, he faced prison, where he spent 10 months reflecting on his actions. Despite his dubious reputation, his girlfriend, who worked as a masseuse, eventually agreed to marry him, and they had a son together. Instead of enjoying family life, Yu Young-chol soon returned to what he knew best: stealing. He was caught again, this time for car theft, and had to go back to prison for 8 months. After his release, Yu was diagnosed with epilepsy, which led to him spending some time in a medical facility before returning to normal life. This newly diagnosed epilepsy would later become something he used to his advantage. Yu was no stranger to breaking the law for his own needs, and his criminal record was full of similar thefts, which he believed caused no harm. However, Yu transitioned from petty thefts to more significant crimes, turning into a sick and perverted individual. His next punishment was a 2-year prison sentence for the illegal sale of obscene photographs. After serving his 2-year sentence, Yu Young-chul was released, only to commit theft again and end up back in prison for another 3 years. His wife endured silently, raising their son while Yu continued his criminal activities and repeatedly got caught by the police. Her patience finally ran out in 2000 when Yu was charged with molesting a young girl and sentenced to another 3.5 years. This was the breaking point, and his wife finally decided to file for divorce. While Yu was under investigation and in custody, the mother of his child reported his abusive behavior and alcohol abuse. Upon his release in 2003, Yu embarked on a new path of depravity and crime that shocked the world and kept the city in fear for a long time. While still in prison, he became fascinated with a killer named Jung Do-yong, who had taken the lives of 9 people from 1999 to 2000. This criminal targeted particularly wealthy individuals and dreamed of becoming rich himself. It seems that Yu Young-chul found a certain kinship between the actions of Jung Do-yeon and his own hatred for those with money. He saw the wealthy as the cause of all his problems. At the same time, Yu Young-chul developed a negative attitude towards women after his divorce. His mind became consumed with hatred, filled with dark and dangerous thoughts. Moreover, Yu continued to idolize his hero. Later, Yu quoted his beliefs, saying that women shouldn't be prostitutes and the rich should understand what they've done. Living with his mother after his release from prison in 2003, Yu was granted visitation rights with his son. These visits could have taken a much darker turn, as Yu planned to take revenge on his wife in the most brutal way. He intended to kill her and then his son. These visits provided the perfect opportunity, but Yu later confessed that he couldn't bring himself to do it. His wife and child fortunately remained unharmed, but Yu found a new target: wealthy people. But first, he needed to practice killing, and he knew exactly how he would do it. Yu crafted his own weapon, modifying a large hammer by shortening the handle for better grip. Along with a knife and gloves, he had everything he needed to carry out what he called his revenge. To test his new weapon, Yu Young-chul began taking stray dogs to secluded forest areas, where he would savagely and mercilessly attack them. It's known that many serial killers have followed a similar path. In September 2003, Yu was just an ordinary man who had recently been released from prison and was enjoying his freedom, but that lasted less than 2 weeks. Then, Yu Young-chul set his sinister plan into motion, targeting a wealthy neighborhood. It didn't take long for him to identify his first victim. Professor Lee, a well-off 70-year-old man, lived with his wife. It was in their home at 10 a.m. that Yu Young-chul, armed with his homemade weapon, struck. He first attacked the man, hitting him in the neck. Then he turned to the wife, beating her with the hammer until he was sure she was dead, before finishing off the professor. Astonishingly, after the brutal murders, Yu calmly cleaned the rooms, washing away the blood, and then left. However, he had to return because he realized he had forgotten his knife in the house. This time, he roughly broke in again, ransacking the place, but taking nothing. He thought that making the scene look like a botched robbery would mislead the investigators. This, however, was his mistake. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they found shoe prints that would soon become very familiar. On October 9th, in another affluent neighborhood of Seoul, Yu Young-chul, armed with the same set of weapons, broke into the home of a wealthy family around noon. Confronting an 85-year-old woman, Yu managed to inflict deep, fatal wounds with his knife before the other homeowner ran out in response to the commotion. He ordered the woman to bow her head, but she refused and threatened him with her son and husband, who she claimed were in the house. Enraged, Yu attacked and quickly killed her. His next victim was the homeowner's disabled son, whom he forced to kneel and then beat with a hammer until he was dead. This incident demonstrated the extent of Yu Young-chul's psychopathic transformation. In this house, he left 3 victims. Although there could have been 4 if the husband had been home, the husband miraculously survived, but was devastated to learn of his family's massacre. The crime scene bore the same hallmarks as the first, catching the attention of the police. Authorities now had a pattern to investigate. They began searching databases to identify the attacker. Yu was far from finished with his activities. He seemed to be just getting started. This time, he broke into the home of a 69-year-old woman. When she encountered the intruder in her home, he dragged her to the bathroom and brutally beat her to the brink of death, showing yet another horrifying disregard for human life. Her barely alive body was discovered by her son, and despite the paramedics' best efforts, she tragically succumbed to her injuries within half an hour. Some media outlets covering the strange deaths began to focus on the proximity of the murder locations and started questioning the possibility that these cases were connected due to similar traces found at some crime scenes. They pointed out the similarities in the deaths and noted that the connection was becoming increasingly apparent. However, to avoid public panic, the police denied that the murders were related. It would be several more weeks before Yu Young-chul's dark desires would overwhelm him again. On November 18, 2003, Yu ventured once more into the affluent Dong district. Breaking into a house, Yu approached the housekeeper and brandished his knife. Threatening her, he forced the woman to show him to the master bedroom, where she said the 87-year-old homeowner Kim Chung-suk and a 1-year-old child, likely a grandchild, were. Yu then faced a problem he had never encountered before. As he rushed at the homeowner with his hammer, the housekeeper grabbed the baby and tried to flee. However, instead of harming the child, Yu took the baby from the woman, placed the infant in another room, and left him there. Yu then returned to the master bedroom, and seeing that the homeowner was dead, turned his rage on the housekeeper, who unfortunately did not survive the attack. This time, the brutal killer made a critical mistake that would soon come to light. Ransacking the property in his usual manner to make it look like a botched robbery, Yu realized he had left blood traces on the safe door when he cut his finger trying to open it, an inevitable find for the police. If you thought this killer had a moral compass because he spared the homeowner's young grandson, what he did next will outrage and disgust you to the core. To cover his tracks, Yu set the house on fire, leaving the child inside, and watched from a safe distance as the blaze grew. Miraculously, the baby was found alive. Although the fire destroyed the bodies and the master bedroom, much of the house remained intact, allowing the police to review the surviving CCTV footage, where they finally caught a glimpse of South Korea's new serial killer. Yu was wearing a sweater he found in the house to cover the bloodstains on his clothes, and he was only visible from the back. But this at least gave investigators something to work with. Naturally, the police found another set of shoe prints linking this crime scene to the others. Who knows, they might have caught Yu soon if he had stuck to his previous methods. But Yu had other ideas and needed a change of scenery, which led him to his next victim. Acquiring a police uniform, Yu began extorting money from escort girls and those working in the red light district. Surprisingly, he was very successful in this new illicit profession and amassed enough money to move into an apartment where he continued his reckless lifestyle. Soon after, Yu began dating an escort girl, which gave him a new reason to hate women even more. When he proposed they live together, she refused upon learning about his previous marriage and dark past. This rejection became a turning point for Yu, fueling his desire for revenge. On March 16, 2004, Yu returned to the streets with one thing on his mind. Disguised in his police uniform, he pretended to arrest one of the girls and took her to his apartment. This time, the girl's death differed from his previous victims. She was strangled. This act showcased Yu's sadistic nature, as strangulation alone wasn't enough for him. Reports indicate he inflicted a deep wound on her head and hung her upside down to let her blood drain onto the floor. Realizing that disposing of the body from his third-floor apartment was too conspicuous and difficult, Yu dismembered the body, packed the parts into grocery bags, and buried them near Sogang University, marking the spot with a bottle cap. Yu didn't leave the bottle cap markers to admire his handiwork, but to avoid using the same burial site for future victims. His next victim broke all his stereotypes. After buying fake Viagra from a street vendor, which didn't work, Yu donned his police uniform and arrested the vendor for violating pharmaceutical laws. Using the vendor's van, he drove him to a secluded spot and attacked him, inflicting head and neck wounds. However, the vendor put up a fierce fight for his life and injured Yu, who responded with a furious hammer attack, delivering over 20 blows to the head. With his own blood now in the victim's van, Yu had no choice but to destroy the evidence along with the body. He drove the van to a nearby parking lot at night and set it on fire. After this incident, Yu once again targeted escort girls in the red light district, initiating a short but shocking killing spree that claimed many more lives and left numerous families mourning their loved ones, brutally murdered by a relentless psychopath. This time, he lured the girls to his apartment, where he beat them one by one and buried their bodies in different locations, marking each spot with a bottle cap to avoid reusing it. Yu followed this pattern with 9 victims until a massage parlor owner began noticing strange disappearances. It turned out that Yu wasn't very good at planning, which revealed many of his past mistakes and eventually led to his capture. Many of the salons where the victims worked were owned by the same man, who noticed one girl never returned from a job. The owner inquired at other salons and discovered that they also had missing girls who had left for appointments and never came back. As the list of missing girls grew, the owner found that the same phone number had been used to book 2 different girls from different salons, both of whom had disappeared. Moreover, the phone number used belonged to one of the previously missing girls. Fearing the worst, the owner reported to the police, and a plan was devised to try to trap the criminal, suspecting that the girls were being kidnapped and sold. Investigators sent an undercover female officer and devised a detailed plan of action. The police laid in wait, believing they were close to apprehending the suspect. However, Yu called the girl back and canceled the meeting. Why? Because the girl was tall. This made sense when considering how Yu killed many of his victims. The positioning of the bodies often revealed that he enjoyed making them kneel, indicating a preference for submissive victims. He seemed to choose targets he thought would be easier to overpower, such as elderly and frail individuals or unsuspecting escort girls. Faced with a tall girl, Yu felt less in control and canceled the meeting at the last minute. It wasn't long before the police found another female officer who fit the profile perfectly. Yu took the bait, and just as he began his routine, he was surrounded by police. It was noticed that he was desperately chewing something, which turned out to be the business cards of several girls. When the criminal was brought into the interrogation room, he revealed to the police things beyond their comprehension. Yu Young-chul was then taken to the Seoul Police Department, where he was asked what he had done with the girls, as he denied kidnapping and selling them. Yu then confessed that he was responsible for the murders committed in wealthy, prestigious neighborhoods. The police were skeptical of his confession and didn't immediately believe him, because Yu, in a shocking revelation, claimed to have killed more than 20 people, starting with the murder in Sinsadong and ending with the murder of an escort girl just days before his arrest. It's unclear whether Yu fully planned his next move, but he used his epilepsy to his advantage by faking a seizure. Remarkably, the officers believed him, removed his handcuffs, and left the door wide open, assuming he was too weak to escape. This negligence allowed Yu to flee and return to his apartment, where he immediately began destroying evidence. Within 12 hours of his escape, Yu was spotted by police and rearrested. This time, there was no escape. During interrogations, Yu changed his story several times, claiming that he had eaten the livers of some of his victims. While this was not proven, some of his victims were noted to have missing internal organs, suggesting that this gruesome claim might have been true. Yu Young-chul agreed to take the police to the locations where he had buried his victims' bodies. It was during this time that he earned the nickname Raincoat Killer because he needed to be photographed during the exhumation of remains. He was covered with a yellow raincoat, and his face was hidden under a mask. The police department faced criticism for how the case was handled. Had it not been for the massage parlor owners, the police might never have caught the man who claimed he would have continued his revenge until stopped. During the trial, Yu attempted to attack the judge and also tried to kill himself while in custody, causing unnecessary delays. He later tried to attack a spectator and showed no remorse toward the families of those he had killed. Eventually, a guilty verdict was inevitable, and this cold-blooded killer now faces the maximum penalty. Currently, he sits on death row, although South Korea has not carried out an execution since 1997. This series of horrific murders and complete disregard for human life outraged the nation. And even if Yu does not face the death penalty, we can sleep soundly knowing that he will spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. I think many of you are familiar with the story of 21-year-old Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel. This young woman, a student from Vancouver, Canada, disappeared and later died in 2013, causing widespread attention. Elisa stayed at the hotel and then vanished on January 31st. Weeks later, her body was found in a water tank on the hotel's roof. Today, I will tell you about another equally mysterious and eerie case, full of interesting information and facts. In 2019, Chan Yin Lam lived in her grandfather's house. Her parents had been divorced for some time, but the 15-year-old Chan continued to maintain a warm relationship with her mother. She had a challenging childhood, having run away from home several times. Nonetheless, Chan was a good student in her younger years, frequently winning swimming competitions and regularly training in diving. Early in 2019, Chan faced academic difficulties. Her grades dropped, and after regular disputes with classmates, she had to switch schools several times. But by May, Chan decided to turn her life around for the better. She enrolled in design courses at the Hong Kong Institute and took a part-time job at a restaurant. Around the same time, Chan started corresponding with a boy, whom she later called her boyfriend. During the summer in Hong Kong, demonstrations began against the extradition bill. Like many young Hong Kongers, Chan Yin Lam joined the protest movement and participated in several demonstrations from June to August. In September, she actively resumed her studies, but it was during this time that the main events unfolded. On September 19, 2019, at 11 a.m., Chan's classes at the Design Institute began, and by 1 p.m., they were over. About half an hour later, she left the institute building with a friend, and they both boarded a train at Tu Keng Leng Metro Station. Chan's home is in the northwestern part of Hong Kong, and she usually transferred at Mei Fu Station to get home. By 2:15 p.m., she arrived at Mei Fu Station, but she stayed on the train when her friend transferred to another line. Then Chan messaged her friends that she needed to visit the K11 shopping center, without explaining why. 10 minutes later, Chan sent a brief message to her friend saying she was heading home. However, Chan never arrived home that day. Her phone remained silent, and on September 21st, her concerned family reported her missing to the police. On September 22nd, around 11 a.m., a local fisherman spotted an object resembling a human figure about 100 meters from the shore. Police boats were urgently dispatched, and the marine police discovered a body in the water. The body, which belonged to a woman and was completely unclothed, initially could not be identified, though the police had their suspicions. According to the preliminary forensic conclusion, there were no external injuries, no signs of indecent acts by third parties, and many traces, including DNA and biological fluids, could simply have been washed away by the water. 2 weeks later, the investigation officially confirmed the identity of the girl as the missing Design Institute student, Chan Yin Lam. Chan's case had many peculiarities, beginning the night of September 19th, a few hours before her disappearance. Her grandfather told the police that at 3 in the morning, he was awakened by noises in the next room. His granddaughter was packing her things, and according to her, she heard some voices and couldn't sleep. Also, according to a classmate, Chan appeared in class at 11 in the morning and suddenly took off her shoes and lay down on the floor to sleep, using another student's backpack as a pillow. The teacher and classmates repeatedly asked her to get up, and after 10 minutes, she got up from the floor. Later in a messenger, Chan sent a message to her friend explaining her lateness in the following way. "It's so scary. I spent the entire night awake and packing things." After her classes ended at 1 p.m., Chan told her friend that she wanted to tidy up her locker. She spent nearly half an hour cleaning before her friend convinced her to leave with her. Then the classmates headed to the Tu Keng Ling metro station, where they boarded a train. At that moment, Chan told her friend that she needed to return to the campus of the institute later that evening, but she did not explain the reason for this return. Then Chan sat on the floor and remained seated there until her friend got off the train at Meifu Station. At 5:18 p.m., she sent a message to several of her friends. "That's very bad of you guys." This message was quite mysterious, and Chan's friend did not understand what it meant. After Chan's death, various theories emerged on social media, suggesting that local law enforcement might have been involved due to the girl's regular participation in demonstrations, but police and officials denied these accusations. On September 27th, the investigation requested a court order, as it was initially assumed that unknown persons were likely involved in the case. However, a few days later, the police stated that the case did not raise any suspicions for the investigators, and the girl must have taken her own life. Moreover, the police informed the public that a few hours before the disappearance, several campus surveillance cameras had captured the girl in various places. The next day, a large group of students called on the institute's administration to release the camera recordings by lunchtime. The institute administration eventually agreed to show part of the video recordings, but only later in the evening. After a few hours, 2 video clips were shown to the students and journalists. On September 19th at the Hong Kong Design Institute, in elevator number 11, the first clip showed Chan Yin Lam entering the elevator on the ground floor at 5:50 p.m. Holding sheets of paper with some writing on them, she pressed a button to go up. A few seconds later, a man entered the elevator, and they went up together. The last seconds of the video showed Chan exiting on a floor while the man stayed in the elevator. However, the recording cut off after that, as the institute administration refused to show the remaining footage for confidentiality reasons. The second clip, time-stamped at 6:59 p.m., showed Chan walking down the street in a crowd, passing by the institute's campus. There was a gap of 1 hour and 8 minutes between the 2 recordings, leaving it unclear what happened during that period. The students were very dissatisfied with the partial release of the recordings, believing that the footage had been edited and manipulated. The dissatisfied students demanded the full, unedited footage to be provided within 30 minutes. When the time expired, some young people damaged glass panels, surveillance cameras, and spray-painted walls. The institute's administration announced that classes on campus would be suspended for 3 days due to the situation. Meanwhile, an additional 20 seconds of the first clip were released. The footage showed that after Chan left the elevator, the man did not follow her. He stayed in the elevator and continued to ascend. The head of campus security assured students and journalists that all video recordings were preserved and stored securely on the institute's premises. Finally, a few days later, the institute administration released more videos. The 16 clips showed Chan's movements around the campus. At 6:13 p.m., wearing a black tank top and black and white striped pants, she walked on level 2 in Block B, the second floor of the Institute. She headed to a staircase to go down to the first level, but returned 20 seconds later and then went up to the third floor. At 6:27 p.m., a camera recorded Chan walking on the 9th level, which is the roof of the Institute. At 6:28 p.m., she continued walking in the open promenade area with her hands clasped in front of her. A few seconds later, Chan walked back. Sometimes she looked around, giving the impression that she was either searching for something or wandering aimlessly. She then entered a building, glanced at the elevator, but did not enter it, and continued walking down the corridor. About a minute later, she returned to the elevator, pressed the call button, but did not wait for it, and left. At 6:36 p.m., Chan returned to the roof. Notably, she was now barefoot. If we go back 5 minutes, we see she was still wearing shoes. Chan took off her shoes after going up to the 10th floor and then coming down barefoot. But why did she do this? 5 minutes later, on the same 9th floor, Chan approached the elevator again. She pressed the call button again and again did not enter the elevator. She then went down to the 7th floor and a couple of minutes later went back up to the 9th floor. She repeated the same actions, pressing the call button and leaving. Chan then ended up on the 7th floor in a cafeteria, where other students were sitting with laptops or eating, paying no attention to her. During all this time, she did not approach or talk to anyone. Again, the same behavior, approaching the elevator, pressing the button, and leaving. Eventually, at 6:56 p.m., she exited the building and left the campus. At 6:59 p.m., she walked barefoot towards a park. Her behavior on all the video recordings looked more than strange. If we go back to the first video recording, we can see that Chan had a red bag at her waist. She also held sheets of paper with some writing on them. But what was written? In the next video, 22 minutes later, neither the bag nor the papers were with Chan. Around 8 p.m. that same day, Chan's bag with her personal belongings was found by a man and a woman on the 2nd floor of the Institute. Inside were about 30 Hong Kong dollars, a student ID, and an iPhone. Strangely, the iPhone was missing its SIM card. It remains unclear how Chan placed her belongings on the 2nd floor, as there are no video recordings of this. In all the videos, Chan appeared disoriented or lost. One person on a popular forum suggested the following hypothesis. It looks like she was trying to reach the highest point. It's not unusual for jumpers to remove their shoes before jumping. She was clearly upset, wandering aimlessly, and considering her options. She reflected a bit more, finally changed her mind, and left the campus. According to surveillance footage, Chan left the campus barefoot and headed towards the waterfront, located about 4 kilometers from the Institute. A second-year student claimed that he might have seen the girl between 7 and 8 p.m. on September 19th, in the same clothes as in the surveillance footage. The guy said she was slowly walking barefoot at Tiu Keng Leng metro station without any belongings. She looked like she was searching for someone, looking around in all directions. However, there were those who still did not believe the footage. Some students suggested that the girl in the footage was an actress involved in a cover-up by law enforcement and officials. A group of students pointed out her eyebrows and hairstyle, claiming that the real Chan looked completely different. Nevertheless, the girl's family members, social workers, and some friends identified her in the footage as Chan. Her grandfather also added that he saw his granddaughter in the same clothes on the morning of September 19th. Another acquaintance of the girl argued that if the person in the video was Chan, she would have had to walk a great distance barefoot to the waterfront, then remove all her clothes and climb over barriers and large coastal rocks to jump into the water. Additionally, all her clothes mysteriously disappeared. When the police discovered Chan, They surveyed the entire shore but never found her pants and tank top. Another acquaintance mentioned that Chan had been swimming and diving for many years. On October 17th, her mother, Ho, said in an exclusive interview that after watching all the camera footage, she concluded that her daughter did take her own life. According to her mother, Chan had been hearing voices in August that prevented her from sleeping. A year later, a coroner's investigation was conducted. The forensic examination revealed no drugs in her body and no traces of foreign DNA, including organic tissues under Chan's nails. As an expert witness, a professor of medicine disputed the suggestion that Chan entered the water on her own. The professor pointed to the alarming fact that no clothing was found when the body was discovered. While loose clothing could float away, tight-fitting clothes such as underwear would unlikely be removed naturally in the water. The professor also confirmed that DNA evidence could have been washed away by water. He criticized the decision of the forensic experts not to conduct a diatom test, which could have determined the exact cause of death. Additionally, a taxi driver testified that on the evening of September 19th, Chan got into his car and asked to be taken to a construction site near Lohas Park Metro Station, located a few hundred meters from the waterfront. A team of detectives investigated the area based on the driver's testimony, but could not find any relevant surveillance footage. The driver's testimony could not be verified by the investigation. It was also discovered that in March 2019, the girl had a confrontation with the police, and on August 12th, she was detained near the metro for behaving emotionally unstable. After this incident, Chan was sent to a special state institution for girls, where she lived from August 12th to September 11th. According to the forensic doctor, Chan exhibited symptoms of various disorders, including confused consciousness, capricious behavior, and complaints of hearing non-existent voices. The doctor also pointed to an increased risk of symptoms due to hereditary factors, as the girl's father had been hospitalized several times in the past with a similar diagnosis. Ultimately, the coroner ruled out all possible versions, stating that there was insufficient evidence for any verdict. This case is very strange, and law enforcement still has no answers to many questions. What do you think happened to Chan on the evening of September 19th? Why was she behaving so strangely? Why did she repeatedly approach the elevator, press the button, and leave? Why did she remove her shoes after reaching the 10th floor? Why did she leave her personal belongings on the 2nd floor of the institute? And where are all her clothes? There are many questions,